I'm delighted to be joined by Tommy Walsh as part of the launch of Guinness's 0.0% new GA campaign. Tommy, delighted to have you along. How are things with you? Keeping well?
I'm great, Shane. Thanks very much. Yeah, doing well. Enjoying being on the other side of the fence for the past couple of months and taking in some of the games that are going on. So yeah, keeping well.
Yeah, and I presume you're still playing club. You got to that county final last year, but certainly a couple of injuries derailed you a little bit that day.
Yeah, I'm still playing away. We're kind of in the middle of our county league at the moment, so it's it's taken still relatively seriously down here. So it's probably focuses the mind a bit, keeps you in shape. We were just a bit unlucky last year. We, as you say there, with a couple of injuries early in the game that probably cost us in the end. But it was still a positive enough year all round. From a club perspective, there was a bit of a buzz back in the place that probably hadn't been there in a while. So hopefully we can carry that through into this year.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Are you missing inter-county football with Kerry? I know you took the decision. Obviously, that's just the way it is. But do you miss it?
I do. I think there are certain aspects that I couldn't wait to get a million miles away from. But at the same time, the games and just the bit of crack, I suppose, around the dressing room, you would certainly miss that. But as I said to you earlier, there I'm enjoying a bit of free time and kind of getting stuck into different things that I would have been able to do over the past couple of years. So it's there's pros and cons, obviously, but I just felt with my body was probably creaking a bit, and with the way that the game's going physically, I just felt it was the right time for me to go.
Yeah, and I remember speaking to Brendan Bugler a few years ago when he had retired from Intercounty, and he said one of the things that he just couldn't stand anymore was all the meetings that go on for hours and hours. And I'm just wondering, is that one of the things that you don't miss?
Yeah, there can be probably overkill in certain aspects, but it's coming from the right place. There's guys inside there, and they're they're only trying to help you to improve, but it's just trying to strike the balance, And I think every year there seems to be some other kind of small thing that's coming in, and there's another coach that needs a bit of face time, or there's another stat or another certain aspect that you're going to analyze. So it obviously all adds up, but as I said, it's coming from the right place to try and make you and the team better. But when you compare it to where it was when I started and where it is now, it's just poles apart. And I suppose to a certain extent, it would kind of make you wonder, where's it going to be in another 10 or 15 years? And you'd nearly be, I'm kind of almost glad that I'm at the end of it, as opposed to coming in now again and going through what some of those guys would go through over the next 10 to 15 years. But it's great because you're getting the most out of yourself, and it gives you the opportunity to push yourself to the limit and see where you can get to. But again, it's still an amateur sport, and it's just trying to strike that balance.
Yeah, and post AFL, when you came back, when you reflect on it now, do you think, what was it frustrating with Kerry? I mean, you weren't always in the team, and of course, injuries and stuff like that, if you can put it that way. Was it a frustrating time? Did you get what you wanted out of it? And I know if you can just leave an All-Ireland win out, to the side, but just personally.
Look, it was obviously very frustrating. It wasn't me being frustrated with anyone else. It was just the fact that I wasn't playing as much as I would have liked to have been. But I probably found adapting a bit tougher than I would have thought. I was working in Cork, and I was driving down, having to drive down an hour and a half in the car and get out and train, which is something that I would have been used to over the previous few years, and even the recovery aspect and different things like that. So it probably took my body a bit of time to adjust, and I was putting massive pressure on myself. I had big expectations of what I was, what I wanted to do. I probably thought I was just going to pick up from where I left off, which was obviously a bit naive when I look back on it. But when I did leave that time, I just felt it was the best for me, and it was the best for the squad, because I didn't feel I was contributing as much as I wanted to be, and I didn't want to kind of become a bit of a burden or a nuisance around the place or anything like that. So I just felt it was best that I move away at that stage.
Yeah, and in the past couple of years, is there any game or a couple of games that are, really come to mind when you think of, this was a particularly good day for me?
It kind of happened slowly, I would think. I just got a bit more confidence in my body. I started playing a bit better, and I just kind of started enjoying it again, I suppose. And I think I had a pretty decent year back in 2018, which led to me being asked back in. And it's not something I was ever kind of chasing. I'd love to. Obviously, I would have wanted to go back and play with Kerry, but it's not something I wasn't going out to play well to be asked back in. But I think when the opportunity came, and I just kind of said, why not? And obviously it hadn't gone well the last time I was inside there, so it kind of gave me a chance to go in and I suppose write a different chapter in it and for it to finish a bit more positively for me than it would have if I had not gone back in.
Yeah, because around that era, just before you got called in, maybe it was the year before, I was down for a couple of the county semi-finals. I can't remember which team you were playing against. It was one of the divisional teams. You were full forward and your hamstring was, you could see that you had a massive amount of wrapping on it. Was around that time, did you even think it would have been possible for you to go back playing with Kerry again?
No, I wouldn't have really, because that was the same hamstring that I'd hurt in Australia, and even though I kind of got back to the place where I was playing AFL before I came home, and then even National League and Championship with Kerry, but then once I stopped playing with Kerry, it kind of got worse again for whatever reason, and I had to put in a lot of work to probably get back to a place where I could even play club football again. So it certainly wasn't on my mind at that stage going back with Kerry, but it was obviously a significant injury, and I always felt after it happened, I was just glad to be able to play sport at a reasonable level again.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, what did you make of the manner in which Peter Keane departed at the end of last season? Of course, things didn't go the way he wanted to, and we'll come to that in a while. But he released a statement saying that the players wanted him to remain. He said all the players communicated to the county board subcommittee their strong preference for the present management to be retained, and of course, he was removed. Jack O'Connor came in. What did you make of that whole period for that few weeks while that was going on, and how tough it was on Peter, I suppose?
Yeah, it was tough on him. Look, he obviously wanted himself and the management team wanted to stay, and he's right in what he was saying. That there was a meeting held, and I wasn't at that meeting, but from what I heard, the players were in support of him staying, but it wasn't necessarily a thing of saying we want Peter and not Jack. The county board made their decision after that, and when Jack came in, I'm sure all the lads just rode in behind Jack, and look, Peter probably deserved a chance to move on, but I'm sure everyone inside there seems to be very happy with Jack at the moment as well. And Jack's obviously very experienced. I've worked with him, back as far as 2000, I think 2009 was probably, maybe 8. He was with my club, I think. So I obviously know him very well. He's a very good manager. He's a good motivator. He seems to have a very good team around him now, and I'm sure the boys are all in behind him as well. Yeah.
Well, what do you think he's bringing to the setup this year that potentially can bring Kerry across the line?
I think at the very least, it's a bit of freshness. No matter how good a management team is, freshness can have some positivity as well. So, but look, he's brought in the likes of Paddy Talley, Mike Quirk, David Murphy's back in there with him. So I would imagine that things have been freshened up a lot, and fellas are benefiting from it. There's a few new guys brought in, those type of things, and they all add up. And they seem to be going well at the moment. It's obviously hard to tell because they've won both their games quite convincingly, and you probably won't be able to tell exactly where Kerry are at until later in the year. But yeah, look, as I said, it's so far so good. They've done everything asked of them, so hopefully the work that they're putting in now of these few weeks will transpire into the quarterfinal.
When you speak to him in the media, Jack can sometimes come across, a small bit stern or whatever. Do you have any early memories of him, or did you ever cross him?
Yeah, he'd be quite old school in his mentality, but a lot of the guys will say the modern side of the game. He gets good people in around him to kind of look after that stuff. But he's it's a long time since I worked with Jack, but I'm sure he's modernised his own thoughts as well. But he's look, as I said, he's a very experienced manager. He's been successful pretty much wherever he's gone, and you need to probably have that sternness or that kind of gap between yourself and your players, where you mightn't necessarily be that approachable or those type of things, and that's very much the way he is. But that's that can be a positive as well.
Yeah. What do you think Kerry have been lacking in the last couple of years? I mean, it's won All-Ireland in 2014 since 2009, so there's obviously something that's been missing for most of these years. Could you put your finger on it?
It's probably just been an ability to close games out. If you look after in the last 3 years that I was involved, there was the final replay that we probably should have closed out. There was a game against Cork the same, and Tyrone again last year. And look, there's all different things went on in different games that can contribute to that also. But we probably made a couple of mistakes or different things that just didn't allow us to get over the line. And that's probably the biggest thing that needs to change, because I think with the talent of players that you have there, you're nearly always going to be in the mix. You're nearly always going to come down to the last couple of minutes, and you're going to be thereabouts. So if you have that bit of nous to get yourself over the line, well, and I think if you look at a team like Dublin, that's something that they certainly have, even at times when the backs have been against the wall and it doesn't look like they deserved or were going to get through the game, and they managed to do it. And that's just probably something that Kerry need to build into their game. But it's not an easy thing to do. Like it's the hardest thing to do, really, is to make those decisions under the biggest pressure moments.
And do you ever feel like you'd often hear this, that maybe the team is lacking a bit of steel, and that's something you would have provided? Of course, you're not there now, but do you think the steel is an issue?
I don't think so. Look, I think there's plenty of guys inside there with that steel. You look at, even someone like Sean O'Shea or someone like that. He's well, to me, I suppose I consider him a young fella, but he's matured a lot over the last 3 years. But like I would, see him as someone who's a lot of steel. If you go into the back line, Jason Foley, Tom Sullivan, Tyke Morley, they've all progressed hugely over the past 3 years. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a lack of steel. Maybe some guys need to bring a bit more, physicality or that bit of nastiness into their game. But it's nearly something that's in you or it isn't. And would it have contributed to Kerry getting over the line in those games? Possibly, but it's hard to know. But I think it's more just that little bit of nous as opposed to the steeliness that would make the difference.
Do you think you were kind of in an impossible situation with the Tyrone COVID thing last year, that if you forced the game to go ahead and you won, there'd be slings and arrows going your way for that. And obviously the way it panned out, you lost. So everyone was like, look, I mean, that was the reason that Tyrone had extra time and maybe they were getting players back from injury and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. You were in a bit of a no-win situation, but do you think you were the victims of how it played out?
I think our attitude around that time was, look, we, wherever they want to play it and whenever they want to play it, we're fine with that because we felt we were good enough to do it. And we obviously needed to play the semi-final. It had been a bit of a gap, I think, between that and our previous game. And I think we played Cork in the Munster final and beaten them quite convincingly. So we needed that game really if we were going to go into a final. Look, it gave us an extra 2 weeks, of course, and there's always a bit of disappointment, I suppose, when something like that happens too much. But you just have to reset and focus your mind to 2 weeks later, or I think it was delayed by 2 weeks. So it obviously worked in their advantage, but at the same time, we were both there on the day. We felt we were in a good place. So did they, obviously, and they beat us in the story. So they were the better team on the day, and you just have to accept that and move on.
And were you frustrated with the lack of information coming out of their camp? Because anytime they were asked about, how many players exactly, or any sort of detail, they'd almost, I was there for some of the press conferences. They were getting very touchy about it. There wasn't information coming, and it was as if you were questioning their honour or whatever. But did you find that frustrating?
You would, I suppose, but you try not to get caught up in it because it wasn't something that we could control. The administrators or whatever had to deal with that, and we just had to get on with it. It was an extraordinary time, obviously, with COVID, and people can be sensitive about that type of information anyway. So, again, we didn't get caught up in it too much. We just had to get on with it and get ourselves ready for the semi-final.
Yeah. So just even to talk about some of the forwards that Kerry have at the moment, David Clifford being the most obvious one. Where does he rate in comparison to all the other forwards you've played with Kerry? I mean, Gooch, Kieran Donaghy and so on, Declan O'Sullivan, there's some great players there. Where would he rank?
Yeah, he'd be up there. He's an unbelievable talent, and he'd remind me of Colin Cooper to a certain extent, because he'd do something on a pitch and you'd say, how did he see that, or where did that come from? And that's what Gooch used to do as well. So they're very much, even though they're different in certain respects, but they just have that. They have just that I don't know, is a little bit of time or that little bit of imagination that very few other players have. But look, what he's able to do is absolutely extraordinary, and but I think in terms of being, one of the great Kerry forwards, he's a long way down that path already. But obviously, to be up there, you need to put a few medals in their arse pocket as well. And I'm sure they're not too far away. So hopefully that starts this year.
Yeah. Would you consider him the best player in the game right now?
I would do, yeah. There's obviously great players around, and I think, you know, when you're talking about the best players in the game, you nearly always tend to look at the forwards. But you know, on his day, and he's just unmarkable, really. And he's as I said, he can just do things that I haven't really seen anyone else do. And you know, I think people were saying there when we found out he wasn't playing in the Munster final that the ticket sales probably dropped immediately. You know, there's probably a couple of thousand people that didn't bother going into the game. That's the effect he has. You know, he's box office for sure.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing about him then is, well, I suppose some of the other forwards as well, like, they're not really talked about, but there's also quality there. And like Paul Geaney is still around, so it's not like he's the only one.
Yeah, and I think you know, a lot of teams probably when they go to play Kerry, they're going to have they're going to have a plan for all the forwards, but there will be a particular focus on him. So I think it will be up to the likes of the Paul Geaneys, you know, the Killian Spillans, the Paulie Cliffords, you know, these type of guys to really step up. And if it is becoming apparent that, you know, that David is getting really clamped down by 2 or 3 guys, that, you know, they can seize that opportunity and use the extra space that they might have to kick on. And that's what it's going to take, because if David's been double marked, the next thing Paul Geaney starts getting on top of his man, well, then their focus is switched elsewhere, and then that allows David to get going into the game as well. So it very much is a group effort, and he's obviously very important to that, but he's not going to do it on his own either.
This past week after the Limerick and Clare hurling match, there's been a lot of talk about, I suppose, players lashing out and swinging out. Let's say a forward who's been man-marked tightly, that he doesn't want the player pulling and dragging out of him, so he's going to just do an old dunt to sort of war and don't come back again. So when you're playing as an inside forward in Gaelic football at the moment, the likes of you, David, and so on, how much of that is happening to you in terms of like someone pulling and dragging out of you to try and distract you or keep you from making a run? And what can you do about it that, you know, is within the law? Well, I suppose you have to go outside the lines really to let a defender know you can't do that.
Yeah. Look, a lot of it goes on, obviously, because like the referee is the only one with a whistle, really. So, and it's very hard for him to see what's going on. Some are better than others at looking ahead of the play, but you know, you'll sometimes you'll get pulled, and then out of a reaction you might pull, but you'll always get done for the second pull, and it's a free out. You know, so it's but it goes on, and in terms of dealing with it, I suppose you probably have to get the umpires a bit more involved. It's for a full forward. If I felt I was getting pulled, I'd literally go over and stand right beside the umpire nearly and show him, you know, what's going on, and just start talking to them of different things. But you know, that doesn't always work either. And you know, they might just tell you to get on with it, that you're big enough to handle yourself. So, yeah, look, it's difficult, and it probably you know, hampers the likes of David and those other really, really good forwards, and you're not probably seeing them do all the things that they're capable of because of that type of stuff. But you know, the best ones are capable of dealing with them. You know, David's well able to handle himself, and most of the other Kerry boys are as well. So it's just a case of not I suppose retaliating or overstepping the mark, while at the same time knowing that you know, I'm not going to allow you to pull me all day, really.
And would you ever be of the mind to say, well, I'm going to nearly get my retaliation in first here, to just let this person know, don't even try it?
Yeah, well, like, I suppose it'd be a bit different for a bigger guy, because a lot of the time you're you know, it's not as if you're lightning pace and you're pulling away from the guy that's pulling. You're generally involved in kind of physical contact for most of the ball that you're getting. So you know, but I often found that, you know, if you started to win a couple of balls early, that the man would generally drop off, because you'd be getting on top of him, and you know, his enthusiasm would wane a bit. But you know, if he won a couple of off you, well, then he'd start, you know, chirping a bit and different things. So you know, you just really have to think of the next ball, and that if you start getting into the game, it generally quieten down your man.
So just ask you then about your clubmate, David Moran, and he had that I think it was an adductor injury or something like that last year that happened in the county final. This year, I suppose he's been used as a substitute. He was brilliant when he came on against Cork. He came on for the last 20 against Limerick. He's going to be 34, I think, later this month. What do you see his role? Because playing midfield at the age of 34 must be an incredible ask for somebody, given the fitness levels that we're now at.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm sure he's going to be gunning to you know, to start. I know when I was in that position as well, I was a sub, and you know, he was much more likely to start than I was that time. But I was, you know, every game I was working as hard as I could to make the first 15. I think that's the way everyone wants to be. But at the same time, if he's only going to play a certain number of minutes, I'd much prefer him to be on the field at the end of the game than the start. But I think, you know, he has been used as a sub, but I think that's probably been as much because Jack Barry and Diarmuid O'Connor are playing so well, as opposed to, you know, them just pigeonholing David as a sub. So, like it was quite a serious injury, and he didn't, you know, he wasn't really able to get a lot of work in the field, you know, over the early few months of the year. So it's probably only now that he's really getting going and into a good bank of training behind him. So, you know, I'm sure once Kerry get to the quarterfinal stage that he'll be putting his hand up. But I know, knowing the man, obviously, I know that while he'd be disappointed if he wasn't going to be starting, he'll play his role as a sub as enthusiastically and put everything into just as much as he would have done if he was starting.
And then the final question: who's going to win the All-Ireland this year and why?
Well, look, I genuinely think that it's Kerry's year. You know, while there's probably early in the year, they probably would have been more fancy than they are at the moment, just because of the progression of the likes of Dublin and a couple of other teams. But you know, I just feel that I suppose the disappointment that's been suffered over the past couple of years, that they would have learned a lot from that. As I said earlier, there's a bit of freshness there. And look, it is a young team, I suppose, but there's a lot of those younger fellas are much more mature now than they would have been 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm just hoping that you know, that little bit of nous is there, and that when the moment comes, that they can close out that game. Okay,
well, look, Tommy, it's been absolutely brilliant chatting to you, and hopefully we'll do so again soon.
Great, thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
Okay, so that was great to chat to Tommy Walsh there, former Kerry footballer. Don't forget, we've plenty of stuff coming on Patreon, whether it's match reports, the Richie Power and Kieran Carey show that we have every Thursday, and plenty more, including the team of the week. So join us there, patreon.com/OurGame, just €5 a month. And if you want to get the match reports package only, it's just €3 a month, and it takes